One for God, one for Wad, and one for Loch, an old Lincolnshire charm. Ratatoskr, a short story by Wild Bill Cox. Introduction. I am Oscar, sometimes called the borer by wise ones of the sort who lie quiet, quiescent, pensively awaiting the end of Fimbulvinter. Though their ideas about me are predicated upon misunderstanding, I am thankful, for to be remembered by mortals is to survive in their world. Once our fertile earth was fought over by implacable enemies, ones whose names are forgotten, and so they have disappeared into shadow, never to return. My lot is far better than theirs, no matter how mighty they had once been. In this mortal's world there is no place for those, but there is still a place for me. And so I survive, at least until I am slain by misadventure, or wounded unto death through malice wielded as a weapon by a clever foe. Your God hung on a man-made tree for 3 days, did he not? A trifle. Vad, mightiest of the Azer folk, hung inverted from holy Yggdrasil far longer. What did your God derive from his travail? Wisdom? No, he had that already. Worldly might, riches, all the women he desired? Again no, for he and the whole of his opinions were set to deny his flesh its just rewards. The shaman took a long pull from his wineskin, spat the heady stuff straight into the fire, causing it to roar like a dragon tormented by mice. No bars, says I. What does a conqueror need other than the fruits of conquest? Nothing, say I, and all the sages agree on it. He turned his eyes from mine so he could address the rest. You take what you can in this world, and brag about it in the rest. Is this not the way of it? Sharp curses and fervent agreement mixed in with the sparks and smoke, soon lost, but, like the warmth, long remembered. The shaman looked back at me, smiling. And what, you might ask, did our sacred Vod receive for his far greater sacrifice? The knowledge of runes and of the true names of all things in this imperfect world. He won his battle, was awarded his desire, not like your sissy god who balked at the brink of mastery, and who exhorts his sissy worshippers from beyond the grave with an infinite series of rules and regulations, and that whole "the meek will inherit" rot that only makes the landowners for whom you toil happy. Sure he had won, secure in the knowledge that the drunks and ne'er-do-wells crowding our fire would riot in his favor, should the argument escalate beyond barbed words. The shaman leaned back, flickering firelight warping his smirk into 1,000 subtle demonic visages. Oh, is that so? I asked rhetorically. I thought he plucked his eye out for that particular wisdom. What then was the hanging sacrifice about? The stories told her too, are they not? In the one he gives up his eye to Mimer for a drink of the well of knowledge, yes? The other one is the hanging upside down one. He didn't suffer 2 sacrifices for the same goal, did he? He was taught the runes in both stories, as I've heard them told. Bah! What do you know? I know my history, I retorted, half drunk and rapidly approaching the shirtless state. And it seems that your Vod was singularly dense, as if it took 2 horrible sacrifices to teach him the same thing twice. Another smile. Blasphemy, is it? He turned outward, raising his voice until all could hear it. This fellow claims Vod is stupid. Anyone care to show him the error of his ways? Growls came from the men around me. He gave his eye for wisdom of what was, what is, and what will come, fool, the shaman went on. And he hung from the world tree 9 days and 9 nights. Here the others near the fire sucked air around their teeth in respect for the magical number 9. For the art of runes. 2 sacrifices for 2 very different types of wisdom. The Christ had already hung from a tree 3 days, and been pierced besides, long before Vod stole the idea for his own, I retorted, and thence learned the truth about life and death and the cycles of everything. He rose from the dead, mind you, something Vod never did, and presides in heaven thenceforth. Vod's sacred sacrifice, his left eye, still resides at the bottom of the clear waters of Mimer's well, uncorrupted by time, for anyone with the courage to go see. And where lies Jesus' corpse now? He spat into the fire again. No evidence of it remains. Again, he trumps your Jewish Christ. This was the information I had hoped to find. Now to get the second part and pursue my secret ends. For anyone with the courage to find. I have courage, I returned. So where is this supposed well you state exists in the mortal realm? Have you been there? Can you lead others to it? I smiled. No? Have you no more truth at your command than old tales thrice told? I laughed at him derisively. The moon is made of green cheese, I said, imitating his manners and the quality of his speech. That is for all to see. A very incautious few laughed at my gaffe, mulling the hostility I had hitherto felt from the crowd. I know it, the shaman retorted, stung at last, but you'll never see it, blasphemer. Ah, so Vod is afraid of the light of truth. Sad that, for Jesus radiated that light like the sun radiates warmth and heat. In the morning, I heard the shaman whisper. I show you something in the morning, you rat. His sleepy smile told me that all I'd find with him guiding would be my murder, at the hands of his friends and adherents. I did not sleep that night, suspecting as I did that robbery and murder lay heavy amidst more civilized thoughts in the minds of those around me. Chapter 1. Dawn was a pale blue haze, lighting only the morning fog, when I staggered to the woods and pissed, still yawning from the effects of bad booze and my uneasy night. None of the bravos who'd threatened me with their anger was up before me, so I walked back and checked my horse and pack beforehand, just in case I had to go on the run again. My good sword, Velida, I belted on, and on the other side my hanger, made extra thick and tough for use as a tool rather than an implement of war. Both scabbards needed repair, but I had not yet the time to turn them over to the old women for fixing. The morning was cold as moor clay after the harvest moon. Shivering, I splashed wintry well water on my face and chest before I wrapped up in my travel cloak of sewed hides. The shaman was not the next one to awake, and I remained patient, waiting on his presence, hoping last night had lit a fire under him worthy of staying near. 6, 7 warriors stumbled forth from the improvised longhouse, ignoring me, intent only upon their morning ablutions. Groans, grunts, and the roaring of unhappy bowels called forth from the woods like the mating roars of bears in a valley below. I was fully awake when the shaman, accompanied by his helper and the 2 addle-brained bearers who'd arrived with him, lurched forth from the hide hung between poles to block the wind from our fire, to stand there, blinking like an owl in the thin light and biting breeze. With calm nonchalance I leaned against my horse, while he followed his fellows to their morning duties. 10 minutes passed, and I began to wonder if the night's drinking had killed him. At length, however, he emerged from the tight ranked ashes, came to the well, and washed the puke from his cheeks with its pure, sweet water. "What the fuck are you looking at?" he demanded angrily, glaring into my soft smile like a tornado trying to hide the sun. "Why, I am showing respect to the most knowledgeable man in these parts," I assured with my voice just north of ribaldry. "And why not? Today you will have your chance to show me that your God is incorruptible, while mine has made the dread journey, and resideth here on earth no more." I grinned, showing my even teeth. "I can hardly wait for your proof to break the dam of my disbelief. Hail to thee, warrior of Vod." "I'll show you something, all right," he promised, red ruin gleaming through his hungover eyes. 20 minutes more, and at last he was ready to make the march to the most mythical place in all of the Dane marches. Astride his beer-bellied nag, he called at the revelers from the night before. "Any one of you wishes to see the Vale of Mimar, this is your chance. I head there now to show this unbeliever that those gone Vikings still have something to teach the weak-willed Christian monks of Albion." Many cheers punctuated this surly speech, but 2 men only trailed along behind us as we set out. These were likely-looking lads in their mid-20s, their accoutrements coarse, but their swords and axes well attended. Murderers and assassins? Probably. And I, a monk of Albion? Hardly. Though I wore the robe, carried the crucifix boldly on the end of my rope girdle, I was no more a monk than Yggdrasil was a tulip. Vod wandered the world in disguise, remember, or so tradition had it, so why not I? No one spoke, and frankly I had no interest in getting to know men who'd soon be corpses rotting into carrion for the ravens, rats, and ants who so well served battlefields both ancient and modern. The ride was long and boring, for the fields and fens of the Dane March had little to offer in the way of novelty. By 10 o'clock, however, we'd topped the last of the series of low ridges between us and our goal. I looked warily at the narrow defile through which I knew the grotto of Mimir's well lay. "Well," the shaman asked with a deprecating leer, "still brave enough to risk the Valkyre's tender embraces? For the word of the wanderer takes any unbeliever who dares gaze upon the holiest place on earth." "One thing I know," I answered, yawning. "Words never killed a brave man. As for the ghosts of slain horrors, I can guess that their claws and phantom swords won't cut living flesh. Only cowardly backstabbers, contract assassins, and bare chests are worth my consideration. Remember, I added with fine-honed cruelty, even if your Vaude needs earthly deeds to legitimize his myth, my Christ has no such worries, for he sees all, knows all, and requires only patience for his ends to be achieved. You'll pay for that, he assured me, staying well away from my sword arm, though I had yet to draw steel. Turning to address his accomplices, the shaman set them to watch the path, while he and I trudged down the long, muddy defile toward the grotto beyond its several kinks and switchbacks. His attendants we left behind to watch the horses, but I already suspected they'd follow us in at a distance. At last the shaman felt it worth making a few choice comments. You might scoff, but your sarcasm only serves to improve the flavor of the soup you make once in Vaude's pot. This place is so holy that none other than Vaude's priests, a few blessed scouts, and the Aesir, whose names are too pure to be sullied by your mouth, have ever gone thence and lived to tell the tale. I laughed out loud, though my every sense was screaming ambush at me. Should Baldur or Tyr or Garm haunt this dismal sump, I'll make short work of him. Never fear. My precious valet has been blessed by 100 priests of Avalon, been purified in sacred fires, and thrust deep into a dragon's heart. No weapon borne by man or Aesir has as much power as mine, and my word on it. A monk or a warrior, he asked, as if to be one excluded the other. Choose one, and be damned for lack of its opposite. You know little about such things, I reckon, was my comment. I do not bring an olive branch, but I come bearing the sword, I quoted, though it was unlikely that this stinking, treacherous Dane would know the verses. Here. We stopped before the spot where the defile widened to encompass a pool of glacial meltwater, whose spring burbled the mud in its deceptive depths. It is said that Grendel emerged from such a pool to savage a king's hall until Beowulf's Wolf put an end to his nocturnal play. Several dry, leafless trees clustered at the far end of the grotto, from which there seemed no other egress than the we've come along. Look thence, I was bade, and curious followed the pointing finger with my gaze. In the unsullied clarity of the pool I made out a sunken rock of white stone, atop whose flat surface lay an herb pouch of the sort carried by hedge wizards everywhere. And be mystified. A bag? You brought me here to see a bag! I snickered. Vaude's priest is a grifter? In a dream I was told to draw you hence, the shaman said, and here you are. He lifted his head to the sky, and in a loud voice, rife with command, he called out, I have done what you asked, mighty one. Show this blasphemer the error of his ways. Hair stood up on my neck as, without warning, a tall, cloaked man entered the grotto from the laced, lifeless trees at its back. He wore a heavy leather hat with a brim so wide it entirely hid his features. In his right hand he bore a spear of uncommon aspect. A hollow, booming voice rose and filled the air around us. I have shown you my eye, stranger. Now I would see yours ere you leave this place. I should have been riveted to the spot in bile-chilling fear, desperate to figure out whether I was confronted by the god or at least by his ghost. Instead, I half-turned, as if to gain room to make a draw, while, perforce, I had moved so that my acute hearing might pick up sounds of the stealthy approach of that pair I had pegged as assassins. Well has it served me, I temporized, and I'll not give it up without a fight. Fair enough, the hollow voice agreed. From the path I heard shuffling sounds, and I stepped back to keep my close enemies in view, while allowing a quick glance at the opening. The two men were coming along, headed toward the grotto, but moving strangely, almost as if... Chapter 2. They slept, rather than walked like men. Shit! The word was drawn unwilling from my tightened throat. As the men entered the sacred grotto, they also left the shade of the defile, and now I could see them clearly. They were quite dead, both of them. One with his fellow's axe buried in his head, and the other opened up like a filleted fish so that his liver and lights were exposed to view. The shaman was just as surprised as I was. His mouth hung open wide enough for a vole to burrow inside to make its nest in his belly. Swords were lifted, and the two dead men turned in my direction, leering unevenly through askew, bugged-out eyes. I was thinking so fast that my balding pate steamed the morning dew atop it into mist. Stop them, I cried at the tall-cloaked man, or I'll push them into the well and desecrate it henceforth. Fool, I heard. I am god of death first and foremost. Feel free to sacrifice them to me at your leisure, or jump in and try to take my eye as you have plotted to do all along. That understanding, this man or whatever had known my secret plan, chilled my blood colder than the day. As for you, he continued, shifting his attention toward his priest, you have defiled my most sacred place for bringing this unbeliever hence. Now pay the price. Now the shaman woke to his peril, and backpedaling, he sobbed apologies. Only did as you command, Dreadlord, I serve you in all things. The great wide-brimmed hat nodded. And now you will continue to serve me in death. The spear rose, the arm holding it cocked, released so that the cloak whirled about like a dancer's skirt. Fly, Gungnir! It was a good throw. The priest pierced through and through, a feat that required an inordinate amount of strength to accomplish. The man, stricken unto death, danced aimlessly to fall almost at my feet, face down in the mud. Kill him, and you drink mead among the blessed in my hall tonight. Fail at it, and I will forget you ever existed. The two dead men staggered toward me, swords up and ready. Velida was already in my left hand, though I had not willed her hence. How to kill what was already dead, I wondered brokenly, but my reflexes, long trained to the business of war and killing, had already figured it out before me. I hacked off a sword arm, reversed, and took the other for good measure. One undead soldier rendered harmless, or so I thought. I had naturally associated the prodigies I'd witnessed as a hoax perpetrated by the shaman and his 3 attendants. Saw through the appearance of the cloaked and hatted man, or so I thought. Now, however, with the obvious death of the shaman and that of 2 of his bullies, not to mention the odd behavior, the hollow, booming voice of the god, I was really worried. As a bear shirt, what you might call a berserker, fear only roused in me a great eruption of hostility toward those who'd put me in such straits. Now I roared, wordlessly, hurled myself forward at the impostor, claiming to be Vod, king of the Aesir folk. Since he'd left himself weaponless, I did not need to counter a spear thrust on my way in. Straight into his chest, right at the top of the arch of his abdomen, Velida struck a killing blow, no matter if the target were man, beast, or monster. Carried away by the bear shirt state, I did not hesitate to observe the result of my perfect thrust, instead pushing up and forward as if on a lever so that my blade wrought horrible carnage inside his bowels. This move made it easier to withdraw my sword without the sucking resistance usually encountered by a deep penetration into the guts. Since he hadn't yet fallen, I continued to stab at him, now into his cloak-concealed neck, face, throat, the hollow of his clavicle with my sword in a reverse 2-handed grip. Any man would have been killed 12 times over before I paused to regain my wind. The hat fell off. The thick cloak dropped down, revealing his features, and I recoiled in sheer horror from the sight thus presented. For the man was dead, the eyes bleached white, glaring forever into nothingness, but still his arms rose, half-fleshed fingers clutching at me like the talons of an eagle. My hair stood straight up and out, as though I'd been struck fair by lightning. Someone screamed. It might have well been me. And I stumbled back from the ruin which had once been a grey-beard man of 40 years. I did not get as far as I wanted, for something caught my left heel, stopping my retreat. Staggering, I glanced down to see the lifeless body of the priest had animated, like his fellows, the dead arm stretched out, linking around my ankle, trapping me. A nightmarish laugh filled the grotto, and the voice of Vod rose over the gross noises of disturbed monk and my ragged breathing. I half-turned to kick the dead priest in the face, the force of my blow dislodging his unholy embrace. When I looked again at the Vod figure, he'd somehow got close to me, was within arm's reach, the half-rotted fingers crooked into claws, ready to pluck my eyes out. My short backhand sweep struck him fair and took away his lower jaw, but no blood flowed. Instead, a veritable cascade of maggots tumbled forth from the wound, and I retched in horror at the sight of it. The awful laughter was not in the least affected by the destruction of the corpse's face. It kept on and on, like a spell cast by a chanting witch. Anger battled with terror in my soul, and won at last. Screaming like a banshee, I hurled myself back into the battle, Velida taking the head off the familiar, who'd been animated by the spirit of the Viking god. I made short work of the grabbing arms, too, with a pair of sun-wheel cuts. Then I turned on the body of the priest, which was crawling toward me as if it were a twisted copy of a crippled spider. I stomped its skull into shards, backed away straight into the raised sword of the last undead assassin. Lucky for me that the dead man was not able to put enough force into his attack, or I should not be telling this tale. Due to the angle, the sword's edge turned sideways when it struck the silver torque around my neck, the notched blade slicing skin, but failing to cut through the thick muscles to either side of my throat. I elbowed the man, knocking him back a little, spun with all my strength, and cut him in half just above the hips. Standing in the rack and ruin, gasping like a man who'd run a message from Kent to Londinium overnight, I waited till my heart stopped trying to fly from my chest before I made sure, one by one, of my enemies. Still scared I was, but not enough to drive me from the place short of my goal. Though the pool seemed shallow enough, it was far deeper. The leather bag I'd hoped contained Vaud's eye too far to reach unaided, despite I tried till my poor arm was frozen blue by the chill of the glacial spring that fed it. Glancing around the ruined grotto, I smiled when my eyes alighted on the spear which had pierced the belly of the dead shaman. This weapon had abbreviated quillons, one of which proved perfect for hooking the binding strap of the sack, allowing me to draw it to the surface and place it, still dripping, into the leather wallet I'd brought along for just that purpose. Why had I come to pluck the unholy eye from its prison? That, my friend, is a story for another time. Wild Bill Cox, 19th April 2014, Aspinwall.